This message brought to you by Sambo and Honky, and now by Cracker and Boy. Produced by Fuckleberry Pie. I love Fuckleberry, you love Fuckleberry, oh boy, Fuckleberry Pie. Fuckleberry Pie. Fuckleberry Pie. Fuckleberry Pie. Fuckleberry Pie. Recently, I decided to buy some aluminum so as to build something like this, except, well, a little better. So the first thing I did was head down to Home Depot and look for some aluminum. And, well, it turned out that their aluminum sheets were not big enough. So then I went over to Lowe's to double check, maybe they had some big aluminum. And no, they did not have it either. So then I started calling around, gradually increasing my range of calling, starting down in Salt Lake City and, in southeast Idaho where I live and whatever, and at first everybody was saying things like, well, what is 5086 aluminum anyway? And, so those guys were not going to be very productive. Other people said, no, we just don't get that. And then I was calling over into Boise and up into northern Idaho and places like that, and people were saying things like, well, no, we don't get that, or it's kind of spotty, maybe we get it sometimes, and the size pieces you need, well, maybe we get those, maybe we don't, call us back in a while, maybe we'll have some. And so eventually I did find a supplier over on the West Coast in Portland. So I ordered some aluminum and arranged shipping, and when the shipment arrived, boy was I happy. But then I unboxed the shipment and noticed that a sheet of 1/2-inch aluminum, it's a 6-foot by 8-foot piece, was substantially bowed in one direction. And here you can see what the bow is. It's about 1 inch of bow across a 6-foot length. Now it's important to note that 1/2-inch thick aluminum is not a pop can. So it's not something that can be easily straightened. There's going to take a lot of force to straighten that out, and it might not straighten the way I want to straighten it. So, I decided that this was not acceptable. So I contacted the supplier with this email. And it says, I received the shipment. Upon closer inspection, it is clear that the 6-foot by 8-foot sheet of 1/2-inch aluminum is not flat. I expected that it would be flat. It is bowed by 1 inch on the 6-foot length. See attached photo. Is this your standard product? It will be time-consuming and expensive to flatten. Please advise how to proceed. And their response was, cut plate is not guaranteed to be flat. When you cut it, you release all the tensions in the plate. This is not unusual, and we send it to boat builders all the time. If you don't like it, you can send it back, but we will not replace it. Well, it sure is nice that they'd allow me to return it, but I'm 700 miles away from them, and the shipping would be prohibitive relative to the amount of the refund. So I thought, well, maybe I'll just eat this one and order another sheet from them and then simply drive out myself and inspect it before picking it up rather than having someone ship it for me. So to better understand what I might expect when inspecting this next piece of aluminum, I decided to send the following email. Please provide a list or table of tolerances that you use to determine acceptability of your product. Please include the flatness tolerance for sawed and sheared plate, both transverse and longitudinal. This information will help me understand what to expect in the future. And their reply was, that was cut plate. There are no mill tolerances on cut plate. It is what it is. 5086 moves a lot when cutting. So this basically implies that there is no tolerance that they have. And this email frees them to send me absolutely whatever they please. And if I order another piece of aluminum, it may be bowed much more than the piece that I already received. So obviously there's no reason to pursue this with this supplier. So this means that I've further expanded my search for a supplier. And one that I called had a particularly interesting response, and they said, well, we stay out of the 5086 space because most of the big players in the 5086 space are assholes. And then I ended up on the phone with a supplier from Louisiana, I think, and they effectively concurred with my original supplier, and they said they could not guarantee the flatness, but it would be flat, but they couldn't guarantee what. And so I commented that according to them, there was no one in the entire United States of America who could deliver 5086 sheet or plate to a specification. In other words, they cannot define their product in all of the United States. And in response, they kind of mumbled something and just kind of let it go. So I thought, well, certainly in the entire United States or somewhere on the planet Earth, we can get 5086 delivered to a specification of some sort. But eventually I did find a supplier that would supply to a standard, and this is the standard that they use. And this is for the flatness tolerance for sawed or sheared plate, and that's aluminum plate. They stated that effectively, if they could not deliver to this standard, then that was their problem, not their customer's problem. But we note that they deliver to the aerospace industry, so they are very accustomed to dealing with standards. And you'll note that the table has values for both longitudinal flatness and transverse flatness. So on the original sheet of aluminum I received, according to this standard, then the 1 inch of bow across 6 feet was 4 times this standard. And as you might expect, I did end up buying more aluminum from this supplier, and their half-inch sheet in the longitudinal direction, it was so flat that it's really not even worth mentioning. And in the transverse direction, it was about a 1/4 inch bow on 6 feet, which is about 1/2 of this standard. So the important lesson to learn here is that if you are receiving shipments of significantly bowed aluminum, then maybe you need to get a supplier who will supply to a standard so you'll know what to expect. In my particular situation, I really don't care all that much about the money wasted on the original piece. What's far more important to me is that I have aluminum that is flat and easy to work with. So you may wonder, well, what am I going to do with that original piece of aluminum? And I think I'll just hang on to it and maybe turn it into a bunch of vibrating keychain dildos. Huckleberry pie. Huckleberry pie. Huckleberry pie. Huckleberry pie.